Welcome to the Lotco Business Podcast, a show all about helping you as a retailer, brand, or creative understand the actual business side of running your business. I offer straightforward, practical advice about the nitty-gritty of making money from your creative passion. We will be covering bite-sized business and marketing lessons, as well as interviews with experts and trailblazers in the fashion, homewares, and design industries. My name is Melissa Robbins. I'm a business coach, colour-loving, non-coffee drinking Melburnian. Let's get into it. Hello and welcome to today's episode. My name is Melissa Robbins. Thank you for joining me here. What I wanted to share with you today are 10 VM tips to help you increase your sales at retail. Now, this can be physical retail stores, it can be at a market, it can be at a pop-up, but it's in that physical space. And how can you increase your sales based on just some of the merchandising? All right, so let's get into it. Number one is understanding your store's hotspot. What's the location that everyone goes to as they walk in the store? Is it to the right? Most of the time, that's the psychology of what people do. They just do turn to the right. Depends on where your front door is, how your layout is, your store is laid out. But what is your store hotspot? Whether that is you just taking, observational notes or doing a little mud map every time someone walks in, like where do they go? What do they do? Where do people linger? What are they focusing on in terms of the level or the height of what you have available? What are those hotspots in your store? And making sure that you know that so that you can rotate your stock appropriately, whether that's where your new stock goes, whether that's where things go when they haven't been moving. What can you do to edit the way your store is laid out to hopefully, capture that hotspot and put some of the products in there that you want to move faster? So knowing where that is in your store and what is the pattern of behavior that people will use as they walk in, and making sure that you're emphasizing the right products in that spot as well. Right. Number two is to price everything. I go on about this so often, it's not funny, but the amount of times that I've gone into a retail store, you go and try and figure out, how much something costs, and you've got no idea because it's not marked anywhere. It's not on the bottom. It's not on a small little tag. It's not on a small little sign in front of it. It's not, on a placard or a little card next to it. There's no pricing. And it drives me mental, and it drives other people mental as well. It is one of those things that really gets my goat, because if I'm going to a physical retail store, I want that experience of knowing what something is as I walk in. I do not want to have to ask. And I also do not want to have a sales assistant to go then and check their computer and check what it is online, because they've got no idea either. That is one of my other ones where I start to see someone do that. I'm like, forget it. If I wanted to buy online, I would just go online in the first place. There's a physical furniture store in Melbourne at the moment who only has QR codes on their products. They don't put any pricing on. And it drives me crazy, because I don't want to have to scan every single thing as I'm walking around the store to know what the prices are. It's just crazy. So if you're in a physical retail store, price everything so your customers don't have to ask. And they're more likely to not ask than they are to ask you and walk out. It's just not a good idea to not price your product. And it's not a way to start a conversation. It is a way to end the sale. So make sure you price everything in your store. It doesn't have to be huge, chunky, obvious pricing either. It can be subtle. It can be underneath the product. It can be to the side of products. There's beautiful little, gold and little tiny little signs or jewelry pricing signs you can use. It doesn't have to be ugly and, in your face either. Right. Number three is reviewing your lighting. What does your lighting look like in your store? Do you have different types of lighting? Do you have the mood lighting, the focus lighting, the spot lighting? What sort of lighting do you have in your store? Do you have good natural light in your store? What is the different things that you have in your store, and how can you edit and change that to, really focus on certain products or highlight certain features of products as well? So making sure that you've got lots of different types of lighting to really emphasize particular spots in your store or draw people in or create an atmosphere. So make sure you've got the right type of lighting placement, as well as lighting, what's it called? The lighting temperature, making sure the temperature of your lighting too. So you don't want it to be all cold if you're trying to create a warm atmosphere in there. So make sure you got the right temperature of your lighting in there as well as position of your lighting. Don't have any dark, hidden spots where people can't see the right things as well. I've got this bugbear about going to particular pubs near where I live, and they have the worst lighting scheme. And I will not go in there because they just have cold lighting. First of all, it's really cold and bright. It's like, cold, blue lighting. And they're really strong overhead. There's no sort of mood lighting at all. It drives me crazy. I mean, that's a pub, so it's slightly different, but still, you want to have good lighting in your store. Number four is to make sure that you consolidate your products. And again, this has come about because I would go into stores and, try and help them increase their sales. One of the things that we would look at is the merchandising. And I would see a particular product and I would see it in like 7, 8 different locations throughout the store. And I'd be like, why is it over there, as well as over there, as well as over there? And people would say they wanted to, capture people if they went into different places. But it just doesn't look good and it looks bitsy all over your store. So consolidating your product, having the product en masse is going to have a lot more appeal than having, 2 over there and 2 over there. The saying in retail is, pile it high and watch it fly. Like the more you have of one product, sort of consolidating it together, the better it's going to look. So make sure you don't spread out your product too sparsely. And that I'm talking about the same product. So for example, I had a client who had particular soaps in there and she had them like, 10 places in the store. I'm like, let's get it all together. Let's stack it together. Maybe 2 if you had like that at the counter as well as on a shelf somewhere else, but not like all over the store. So consolidating your product together, the like product together. Next, number 5 is having various heights and levels of your product. So what I mean by that is you go into a supermarket and the middle shelves are the ones that are the most popular or the ones that people pay the most to be on. The ones at the top or the bottom, the sales are going to be less because people don't want to bend down and look at something or search for something, as well as up high, it's harder for people to see or reach. So it doesn't mean you can't have things up there, but you would probably have repeats of things that you have in the middle or at eye level, as opposed to that product only being on the top high shelf. So understanding, what levels you have in your store, where things are focused in terms of the eye level of your customers. Don't make people bend down too far to actually see or find something. As I said, unless it's a double up or, let's say I had a client who had little scooters that she had for kids. And so then they were on a lower level as well as up a high level, so that people could see them. They had that attraction, and they could sort of see what it was, but it wasn't that they were needing to get that down to actually see it because it was in a different location as well. And then when you have a store, often you will see on display, people have, like one main table that they have some things on at the front or in the middle of the store when you walk in. Make sure that has levels and dimensions to it. So it's not just like one flat level. Maybe you've got a vase on there to sort of, showcase something new. Maybe you've got some stacking things on there so that you can stack your product in, different levels so that it draws the eye to, what's at the different heights as you walk into that store. So having different heights or levels in store, and I've seen a lot recently as well as, the last few years, a lot of merchandising with books. So let's say you're selling a bag or sunglasses, there'll be actual like beautiful interior books in the store where the products are stacked onto that, just to give that little bit of dimension and variety in what the product looks like. And it just gives that impact level and height and changes the view of that product as well. So having different levels and heights in your store is really important, and don't put everything down the bottom or, things up too high. Make sure that you've got a mixture of where those products are located as well. All right. Number 6 is making sure that when you are displaying things, you display them in, and this comes about if you've got, and this is more about the visual merchandising side in terms of if you're doing a vignette or something like that in your store, but having collections of 3 or 5, that can work really well as opposed to, 4 of one product stacked neatly together. Have 5 so it's stacked up in a little, triangle pile. So having your products in groups of 3 or 5 can work really well for it's more appealing to the eye than having even numbers as well. So 3s or 5s. Number 7 is to make sure that you change often. So change is my title for this one, where you really want to make sure that you are always either moving things around in your particular store, if that's possible, whether that's just, a turn of the table or a rotation of stock into different places, or it means you changing your window, or it means changing the way your counter's displayed, or it means that you've got, a different product as you walk into that hotspot, but changing your products around regularly. You want to encourage the customers who come in all the time to sort of be thinking, oh, that looks new or that looks different, probably because you've just moved it, but they don't necessarily know that. And within that, I know I've had this before. People say, oh, all my regulars always complain if I move things too often. And it doesn't mean that you have to move the whole store around, which one of my clients does actually, they do a whole seasonal change around of their whole store, which takes them 2 days to do. But you don't have to do that, but it's about doing little tweaks often and making sure that you've got variety in the way things are merchandised, the where they're merchandised, and how maybe display them, whether you've got a different type of display on the either at the counter or in your middle of your display table or on your window. So making sure you change often. And it's always one of those things, as soon as you start changing things or making a mess in your store, it always brings people in. Same way if you start unpacking boxes, people are always bound to come in when that's actually happening. It's just the law of attraction. I think that sort of thing it's crazy. Number 8 is to make sure that you're keeping your store clean. Now, this may be a no-brainer. You may be thinking, of course, why would I not do that? But just making sure that's an emphasis. So you don't want people to be, touching a top shelf and then getting dust all over their hands, or looking in the corner and seeing dead flies everywhere, or just sort of seeing tumbleweeds flick by on the window. Make sure that you clean your store often and that you make it a part of your standard operating procedures for all your staff, so they know what they have to do, and that it's an everyday activity. It is something that everyone has to do, whether it's sweep, whether it's dust, or whether it's, move the displays around. Make sure that cleaning is part of your everyday jobs, and make sure that you do it a big clean often as well, just sort of, whether it's cleaning out under your counter, around your computer or your point of sale on the counter, making sure that you clean your store regularly. It is a little thing, but it makes a big difference. So making sure you do that as well. Number 9 is about adding visuals. Now, this is one of those things where as consumers now, we are so used to having so many images thrown at us day to day. You're scrolling, you're seeing hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of images. You get bombarded with images everywhere. And so not saying that you want to go into a store and see that same sort of feel, but you do want to have some imagery, some visuals in store. And so often I've seen this be lacking when in stores now, physical retail, where you walk in and there's not one single image of a product on a person, or, a visual of a campaign image or any moving images at all. But ideally, you would have some sort of visuals in store, whether it's your actual brands that send you photos, whether it is you've got a moving video screen, and this doesn't have to be a fancy, $5,000 screen that you buy. Especially, you can buy a TV and put your own frame around it, and it can look amazing. And I'll put some links in the show notes for where I've shared some examples of that. But definitely having some moving imagery really attracts people. It's sort of tapped into the way people buy these days. They are inspired by seeing other people in the product. One of my clients who has a retail store as well, I said to her, her products look so good in her campaign imagery. Why couldn't she add that onto her swing tag? It doesn't mean she had to do it for every single product, but maybe some of her products that she had a lot of, she could have a special swing tag, but actually had the image of the person wearing the product, just to really capture that essence of this is what it can look like. And I know that you've got online, but if people are in your physical retail store, that would certainly help them visualize and see what that product looks like on. Of course, you can have other imagery around as well, but I think that could be a great way to actually add that visual element to selling your product as well. Number 10 is to make sure that you consider your counter display. Now, of course, everyone understands that they should have counter point of sale. So you've got products where people can add on at point of sale and they can grab or quickly, you can upsell them certain things. Ideally, you would have a few options for them, whether it's cards, whether it's I know I had in my children's store, I had like lots of things, because kids obviously would try and buy lots of things at the counter. So that worked really well. Things like Mecca and stuff like that, that they do that as a plan, or H&M, they have that way that you move through the checkout area, and there's all these little things that you can add on. How can you do that for your store? What does that look like for your store? Whether it's little things on the display, whether it's little chocolates, whether it is in, cards, whether it is wrapping paper, what can you put on your counter to increase that add-on value or increase that upsell? And then also just just as like a conversation starter. I was in a store the other day, general store in Venice Beach, and it was a store that I have actually pinned on my Pinterest page. And as soon as I saw it on the outside, I'm like, oh my gosh, I know this store. I didn't even plan to go there. I was just walking past with my sister. And I saw the image and I'm like, oh my gosh, I know this store, because actually my Pinterest board that I've actually loved the display of how they showcase this, the name of the store. And I walked in, I've got some visuals. I'll share them in the show notes as well. But one of the things that they had on the counter was, when I bought something, was they had that little cute little matches. And I saw this at 2 other stores when I was there as well. But matches with their product name on it, with the store name on it, that you could just take away with you. Now, it's a tiny little thing. It probably costs $2 or something like that, or maybe even less. But it's just a great little thing that I could just take for free. And I had this, thing that I could take home, or you keep on your, desk at home, light your candles, whatever it is. But you've actually got something to take away from the store. And it was also a cute little conversation starter while I was there, talking to the girl about it. So what can you have on your counter that's actually going to start a conversation, or something that people can take away, something that you can upsell, something that's going to, encourage them to sort of engage with you at the checkout as well. Maybe even it's, where they can add their name to the mailing list, or they can be part of a competition or a giveaway. If they go on your mailing list, they can get something. So they're all great places for that to take place as well. All right, so today I've just covered 10 VM tips that can help you increase your sales in your retail store. And this obviously also applies to a pop-up store or a market store as well. Lots of these things where you can sort of have that impact of physical in-person shopping. I'll just reiterate what those 10 are. Okay, so number 1 was understand your store's hotspot. Make sure you know where that is in your store. Number 2 is to price everything. Please do not price everything. It drives me crazy, as well as many other consumers as well. Okay, so number 3 is review your lighting. Make sure that you understand all the different types of lighting you need and the mood of the lighting and the ambience of that lighting. Where can you feature particular products as well? Number 4 is to consolidate your products. Make sure that you group together like products, and also make sure, number 5, that you have lots of levels and heights as well. Don't have everything on one dimension. So make sure that you add that in as well. Number 6 is odd numbers. Make sure that you have things in 3s or 5s or 7s. It is more pleasing to the eye to have that visual, that odd numbers in the display section of your store as well. Number 7 is to change often. Make sure that you change all the time, whether that's your store layout, your window, or your, feature things on the counter, making sure that you're changing things often. Number 8 is to keep it clean. A no-brainer, but I really think that's something that people need to be told sometimes. Number 9 is to add visuals. And number 10 is to add counter interest. I hope that you can add some of these elements to take away for your physical retail store, or your next market, or your next pop-up store. I think there's a lot to be said for, obviously we've got to get traffic into the store in the first place, but once you actually do get people into your store, how can you have an impact on the way that they're buying, the way that they're moving around your store, the things that they're attracted to in store? These are all in your control in some ways by using these different elements. Thank you so much for listening. I look forward to speaking with you soon. Thank you so much for listening to the Lotco Business Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please make sure you subscribe to receive future episodes as they are released. And I'd be so grateful for a review on Apple Podcast. If you would like a copy of the show notes or any of the links mentioned today, please jump onto my website at thelotco.com.au/podcast. Have an amazing week, and I look forward to chatting to you again soon.